Hey guys, Invader Kim here with a new video about PAX Day. Dungeons in this game can be a very fun challenge to do with some friends. We don't have a large clan, so learning how to do dungeons effectively has been interesting and has involved some trial and error. But I am confident that we have a good strategy now and have successfully completed a few of the mini dungeons the game has to offer. We even will ask our neighbors and other friends we've met on our shard to join in for some fun now. I think the sweet spot for an easy dungeon run is about 8 to 12 people if they're listening to the calls and pulls. We have tried them with less people and worse gear, but had issues with one wrong thing happening, wiping us, then spending another hour or more getting back within pull range of our corpses, which is not fun. I don't really want to go over our strategy completely, but I do want to bring up a few things we noticed early on that will really help you in clearing dungeons as a smaller group. Have you noticed hidden back doors to dungeons on your map? I'll use Ancien as an example because my clan lives here on our server, and it's the best map for resources, in my opinion, with the pitted zone easily accessed for pure iron without entering the PvP zone, as well as the easiest backdoor locations for all the dungeons in the region. We picked this region without knowing about these two things going into it, but have been pleasantly surprised and very happy with our location, and will definitely build here in future wipes if things stay similar to how they are now. During our first ever dungeon attempt of early access a few weeks ago, we actually ran into another small clan who was doing their first attempt and found out some interesting things. There are different dungeon instances for each of their maps. We were talking in Say Chat to this other group, yet they were not in our dungeon. We both ended up wiping and would have seen each other and could have banded together at the entrance to get our bodies back easier, but that wasn't possible since we were in different instances within the same dungeon. I'm actually not sure how this works, and I may be incorrect, so feel free to correct me in the comments below if you know more about this. Later on, we got some help from another larger clan that came into our dungeon and rolled through it. So I'm not sure what makes the choice for which instance you get into. Is it random luck to get into a dungeon another group is already in? Do you have to be close to the door when someone else comes in? Either way, with that first dungeon attempt, we were hooked and wanted to explore and get better at doing them with our small group and figure out a strategy that didn't require strolling through like a New World chess run. Our strategy can be similarly boring, but it utilizes pulling with range and having the tank behind the others, drawing threat but being hard to hit. Anyone could use this strategy, and if you've watched any of my other videos where I've mentioned positioning or shown any dungeon gameplay, you've probably seen us doing this there. I won't go into specifics here, but it's super easy to learn and an effective way to pull in dungeons as a smaller group without dying once you get it down. I highly suggest using this strategy if you aren't in a huge clan. That first dungeon was fun, but we wanted to do it as our smaller group and hear comms and have fun without worrying too much about dying and losing all our stuff if we wiped. It took a few more attempts in learning the dungeons to feel confident enough in adding random other people in with us, but we have a pretty nice group we play with now and throw in a few new friends when timing allows with all our schedules. In that first dungeon run, I met Valkyre, a random person from another clan who was interested in mapping the dungeons of Ancient and elsewhere in PAX Day. I sent them the backdoor entrances to each of the dungeons as we found them, and they sent me these maps as they completed them. We have used them in our runs ever since, and it has made for a lot smoother runs, knowing where you're going and where the chests are. I wanted to shout them out here specifically because these maps they've made are pretty spectacular, and this is just by using the free version of Dungeon Scrawl's website, along with F7 in-game to slowly scroll out each of our local dungeons. Anyone else wanting to make maps can do so with a little time and effort, and I definitely think you should. If not for everyone to use, at least for your own runs, I highly suggest finding a back door and scrolling it from there, as it'll be much safer for you. That brings me to my next point. Explore your regions and dungeons. In Ancient, we stumbled upon the back doors accidentally in our group. Our first successful dungeon run, we were really excited thinking we were loading into a second level of the dungeon, only to realize it spit us out near the middle of the map. After marking the location, we noticed some other dead-end roads that looked similar close by, and after trekking around, we found these were more backdoor entrances. Some strategic deaths got us to spawn at the actual entrances to know what dungeon leads where. I've mapped them out here and shared them with our clan and other friends over the past couple weeks, but wanted to really point it out here in this video so it's more widely known. I think Ancient is unique in that they're all so close together, but there are definitely back doors in other regions you can utilize. And if you've found any, I would love to know where they are to mark them on my own map. I want to explore the whole game eventually, but any help finding specific dungeons before I get there is always appreciated. We use the backdoor entrances when we do our dungeon runs. This gives you a few advantages over the front doors. Namely, there are no mobs in the caves, so you can easily get to the dungeon without fear of dying on the way in. There is usually a chest or two, as well as some potential boss spawns pretty close into the back entrances as well, so you can get some decent loot fast. We set up our group of 7 to 8 to farm these entrances in a little loop, and only go so far in each dungeon before heading back out, maximizing our looting potential while minimizing the risk that we wipe, since we do have to play it safe with some pools not having very many people. The better gear we've gotten from these dungeons has helped a lot to make our runs even smoother. I hope these entrances stay mob free, as it's very helpful to have different options in getting into places. The front doors on dungeons could be really useful to farm more bosses on, and we have done that with the ones around us and gotten some really nice items. But sometimes you just want to enjoy the dungeon run itself and not worry about getting into it. We've also found that you can reset the dungeon instance, which makes it possible to farm the mobs near the doors a bit easier than waiting for respawns in the open world. We've done this with bloated hellions to farm more jewelry materials and crimson runic leashes off of them, but it can work for any of the mobs right inside the dungeon you want to farm a bit easier. Harder to get drops like crimson runic leashes and tattered sigils that you need a ton of to craft the cooler magic items hopefully will get boosted drop rates eventually. But until then, I guess this is somewhat of a gray area, I would think, on abusing mob spawns. I don't think it's really any different from clearing dungeons up to a certain boss for a loot drop and then resetting it to try again. In other games I've played before, that's common practice, as is fishing for proper boss spawns and stuff in dungeons before settling on clearing an instance. I don't think this should be changed personally. Making it so you can't F7 in a dungeon instance would help stop boss fishing, but it also makes it a lot harder to map out the dungeons in general, which I also don't want. Our first dungeon we completed, we ended up not getting a single boss to spawn in it, and it was actually really disappointing. We were so excited to get a group together to do a dungeon run, and we went straight through the whole dungeon and there was no boss spawn at all. I think that's pretty disappointing. I think it's really cool that they have added these back doors to dungeons, and I really hope you guys start using them as well if you haven't yet. It can really give you an easier time getting into the dungeons with smaller groups without worrying about losing people on the way in. Enabling easier access to harder content if you just look at your map and do some exploring, I think, is a very clever way to have these in the game. Hidden in plain sight for the people who want to use them. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date when I release a new video. As always, I'll be back with another video soon.